Welcome back to another game of GP Florence. And here we have Ambrose versus Herzi. Herzi is on Tropic Thunder, although version without spirit scripts. And Ambrose is on EurekaTell. Ambrose draws a hand with only one land, so they can't possibly keep this, and they mulligan. Herzi, meanwhile, gets a hand with only a Portal Fracture and Breach, but they're going to keep it. I guess that works out well for them, because if Herzi can just counter the one big cheat spell that EurekaTell casts, then they buy themselves a lot of time, because now their opponent has to spend a lot of time finding another cheat spell. Anyways, Ambrose gets a 7 that has Answer Midnight's Call plus a cheat target, and then turn 1 Seek Prophecy to find something else to do. So Ambrose fetches for Crystal Caverns turn 1 and uses Seek Prophecy and finds... well, they can get Nebula from that, right? Or they can get Farseek. Actually, yeah, taking Farseek is probably better here because Nebula and Farseek both get them a land, but Farseek gets to play a turn earlier, and Ambrose has nothing else to do on 2. I guess Herzi can... well, no, Ambrose is on the plate. Herzi can't actually counter the Farseek, since Herzi can't get Portal Fracture up for Ambrose's turn 2. But Ambrose takes the Nebula anyways. Was there a reason for that? Because if Ambrose took the forest, then they can Farseek and then go to 3 lands, and if they top deck a land next turn, then they can answer Midnight's Call. But with this play, they're always locked to using Answer Midnight's Call on turn 4. And Herzi doesn't run any 1-mana counter spells, right? Main deck at least. So yeah, there was really no reason for Ambrose to take Nebula over Farseek, unless they really need Nebula to make colors that Farseek can't. But I don't think color requirements are so strict right now that Ambrose needs to take Nebula over Farseek. So yeah, Ambrose just passes turn 2 without doing anything. And I mean, okay, so I guess it wouldn't have mattered in the end anyways, because Ambrose doesn't manage to top deck their 4th land. But still, I guess also, Herzi had a counter spell for Answer Midnight's Call in the form of Portal Fracture if Ambrose did top deck a land. But like forcing Herzi to counter Answer Midnight's Call, probably pretty useful. Okay, Into the Woods. So I guess that's how Ambrose is going to get to their 4th land. Is Herzi going to counter the ramp spell? Actually, I think Herzi probably wants to, because from how Ambrose played, I think Herzi can kind of deduct that Ambrose is not holding a 4th land. So Ambrose is relying on Into the Woods resolving in order to get their 4th land. Because if Ambrose did have Into the Woods earlier, then they definitely would have cast it earlier. That means Ambrose must have top decked into it. And Herzi casts Cursory Glance on Into the Woods. So yeah, they make the correct deduction and countered Into the Woods. And Herzi plays their 4th land and passes. Now they have Portal Fracture with Wanderlust up. And Ambrose doesn't draw a land, so they just pass. And Herzi end of turn flashes at Mabel. Draws Bounty of the Garden, so that's something that Herzi can use to beat down Ambrose if they continue to not do anything. And Renewal Grove, so that's 5 lands. And they have Thunder Roads up. They have the right colors for a 2-drop plus Augmented Thunder Roads. Ambrose finally draws into their 4th land, but it's probably too late now. I guess they tried to answer Midnight's Call and then follow up with Foil's Fellowship. I mean, the first answer Midnight's Call is going to get countered by Portal Fracture, and then Foil's Fellowship is also going to get countered by a second Portal Fracture. And Augmented Thunder Road is going to kill Ambrose before they get time to do anything after that. I think the game's pretty much wrapped up for Herzi. Ambrose leads off on Foil's Fellowship. Herzi fetches, and then counters with Portal Fracture. And that even makes it 2 tokens. So now end of turn Herzi gets to play Augmented Thunder Roads, which deals 9 to Ambrose's face, and they just swing in for lethal during their turn. So yeah, a pretty decisive victory from Herzi. I don't think there was anything Ambrose could have done to prevent this, because they just didn't draw the lands they needed. And even if they drew the lands they needed, Herzi always had enough counter spells to stop what Ambrose was trying to cheat out. Going to the sideboard, Herzi definitely wants Borean Cosmic Sinkhole, so they can counter 2 drops while still being on the draw. I don't think El Bayou is good because, sure, it gets rid of the 1 big tokens from the Planeswalkers, but ideally you're not going to let the cheat spell resolve in the first place. And from Ambrose's side, they probably want to bring in Spell Pierce and Neutralize to fight back against Herzi's counter spells, and Portal Fracture and Cursory Glance too, probably. So game 2 is underway. Ambrose gets a hand with 1 Pre-Circus Sanctum, so yeah, they can't keep this. Herzi, meanwhile, gets a hand that has 2 lands, and, well, 2 confirms and 2 King Dancers, so that's a pretty strange hand, and I don't think this hand's actually good, because by the time that Herzi can cast the confirm, they won't actually have the shifting lands around to confirm them, and then King Dancers also don't flashback the confirms. But it seems like Herzi is going to keep anyways. And Ambrose mulligans into a hand that has a counter spell and then some cheat targets, and they're just waiting to draw some way to cheat them out. Well, there you go. But now Ambrose has to hope to draw lands. Herzi is going to sack Shifting Cascade now. And they get Renewal Grove. Okay, so it seems like Confirmed Hypothesis will eventually find a target because they drew 3 lands that all sack themselves. Ambrose drawing Shifting Grove. So yeah, there's their 3rd land. because he just needs to draw 4th. And Herzi isn't actually on any counter spells right now in hand. Yeah, Herzi's hacking their Shifting Cascade again. Probably making blue-white now for Annabelle things, yeah. And they get ready for anything. Okay, so still no counter spells. That means next turn, if Ambrose tops like a land, they can play Forest Fellowship and put in Crane, which will immediately become active and control the opponent, which allows Ambrose to force the opponent to keep dumping stuff and then dump their own Valier off that. Or you just play the land and passes. So they're holding up Annabelle things, seems like. And if Ambrose doesn't do anything, then Herzi can confirm the Shifting Grove or the Renewal Grove. It seems like Herzi is going to fetch now. So are they just not planning on confirming? Or are they confirming the opponent's Shifting Grove? Oh, right, they can Annabelle things the Shifting Grove activate ability and basically put Ambrose down a land. Well, but Ambrose can't Spell Pierce that, I guess. Actually, Ambrose sort of has to Spell Pierce that, because if this play goes through, then Ambrose becomes 2 lands down from Forest Fellowship, and that just puts Ambrose 2 turns behind, which is kind of unacceptable in this scenario. So yeah, Ambrose has to Spell Pierce that. But that means that if Ambrose tops like a land here, they can't Forest Fellowship in the same turn, and Herzi has a chance to find a counter spell. Well, they drew a tap land, so it seems like they wouldn't have been able to Forest Fellowship anyways, but next turn they can Forest Fellowship, so Herzi needs to find a counter spell before that happens. Well, Ambrose manages to get Tyrant Tributes under the Precursor Sanctum, so even if Forest Fellowship gets countered, Ambrose can just draw another land and then Precursor Sanctum the Tyrant Tributes. So yeah, Herzi's still not drawing into a counter spell. They can ready for anything and try to dig for one, I guess. And there's Seek Prophecy. I mean, right now, the obvious play is just to slam Forest Fellowship and see if Herzi has any counter spells. If that doesn't work out, then next turn you Precursor Sanctum, cast Tyrant Tributes, and then see if Herzi has counter spells. If that doesn't work, then I guess... Oh, but Ambrose is going to Seek Prophecy first. And that's actually pretty clever, because they can dig for land this way, so they're going to take land here, right? Actually, they can't just take another cheat spell off this thing. No, they have to... Wait, I feel like that's just bad, because now you just give your opponent more time to draw into counter spells. But the play I was thinking of was that Ambrose takes Nebula there, plays Nebula, so they have 4 mana left over after Seek Prophecy. They try to jam Forest Fellowship, it gets countered, and then next turn they have enough mana to activate Precursor Sanctum. Also, Red Teams will counter the Precursor Sanctum activation. Yeah, I guess making that play does play around Annabelle themes better, although it doesn't play around pretty just drawing a counter spell naturally. I assume Herzi's just going to go for end of turn, ready for anything, Cane Dancer back, ready for anything, draws him 2 cards, lets him dig 4 deep for a counter spell. I mean, they're definitely scrying for counter spells here, right? They draw Secrets of Corlight at Court instead, and then they cast it. Well, they draw okay, I see. They scryed Cosmic Sinkhole to the top, and then use Secrets of Corlight at Court to draw it. I don't think Ambrose is going to win this game anymore. Well, actually, no, they still have a chance if Herzi doesn't draw a second counter spell, but Herzi just has so many opportunities to dig for cards now, between Cracking the Clue and then Cane Dancer, bring back, they're ready for anything in the yard. And then even Secrets of Corlight Court, that also draws a card. A Pool of Light, so that comes to play tap because Ambrose doesn't have a basic island, which is a bit unfortunate because that means Ambrose can't force Herzi to Cosmic Sinkhole for 2. And that actually does matter because a Sinkhole for 1 means that Herzi gets to Cane Dancer, back something, and Crack the Clue in the same turn. Whereas a Cosmic for 2 would mean that Herzi can only do one of those things. So Herzi can dig about 3 cards deep for a counter spell, I think. But they're going to Crack the Clue first for some reason. They're going to keep up Cane Dancers. I mean, they don't have Portal Factor, right? So what are they flashing back with Cane Dancer other than ready for anything? Like, what are they keeping up the mana for? And now they don't have counter spells anymore, and if Ambrose tries to go for it, then Herzi has to dig for counter spells while the spell's on the stack. Well, Ambrose is going to try to Precursor Sanctum, and that's going to get Annabelle themed. Herzi lets it happen. I guess Herzi just figured that they can just Annabelle themes the ability of whatever thing comes in. Well, actually, no, it's because if Herzi Annabelle themes the Precursor Sanctum ability, Ambrose just gets to activate again next turn, so Annabelle themes it only delays it by a turn. I think here, something funny that they can do is, confirm the Tyrant's ETB ability and force Ambrose to sack stuff too. And then after your copy is resolved, you Annabelle themes Ambrose's copy of the ability to really screw Ambrose over with their own card. And actually, that's why Herzi kept all these confirmed hypotheses, because it allows them to copy Ambrose's Planeswalker abilities. Although it doesn't have it against Crane, because Crane will control you and prevent you from confirming anything. Yep, so Herzi copies the Tyrant Trigger and forces Ambrose to sack after stuff. That's 3 things that they have to sack. I think Ambrose just sacks 3 lands because they'd rather have the 6 it can play and force Herzi to find a way to deal with it. I'm expecting Ambrose to probably sack Precursor, Pool of Light, and Forest. Ambrose decides to sack Tyrant Tributes. I guess they figured that they're going to be able to top deck a land eventually and play Forest Fellowship, but yeah, Herzi has a second confirm, and they're going to confirm the Tyrant trigger again. And now Ambrose has to sack 2 more things, the 2 land, and Ambrose just concedes. So if Ambrose decided to not sack Tyrant there and say sack 3 lands, and then Herzi copied the trigger yet again, Ambrose probably just sacks their 2 other lands because they're already way too deep in the Tyrant plan anyways. And then Herzi sacks 3 lands, they still have 3 lands left over when they untap, so they just get to end up all things, the Tyrant, and leave Ambrose with no land, and yeah, Herzi probably just wins from there too. So either ways, I think Herzi was going to win from that scenario. But yeah, that was absolutely wild play. Herzi using 2 confirmed hypotheses to reverse card their opponent's Tyrant tributes. And Herzi handily beats up Ambrose, securing them a spot in the top 8.